There's a small difference between fluent speakers and advanced English speakers. Now, fluent speakers know when to use the right word in the right context, but sometimes advanced speakers are using too formal or too informal of language, and in today's lesson, I'm going to teach you when to use the correct word. A dead giveaway, or a sign that you are not a fluent speaker, is that you are not using the language in the right context. So we're going to talk about using formal versus informal words in today's lesson. Let's get started. Let's talk about the term beat up. When your car is beat up, it means it's damaged. When you are beat up, it means you are injured. And if you beat someone up, it means that you have either punched them or kicked them or done something very violent. So, beat up is an informal term. The formal term of beat up is assaulted. If someone is beat up, they have been assaulted. Or if you have beat up someone, you have assaulted them. Now, a police officer might say an assault instead of he got beat up. Oftentimes in crime shows, they say he was assaulted. It would not be appropriate in a courtroom or a professional context to say they got beat up. If you're talking about yourself or your car, or you're talking about a pair of shoes that are looking old, you can say that they got beat up. That is a perfect informal term to use instead of assaulted. But again, assaulted is very clinical, it's very legal. So that is when you would use the term assaulted. Now make sure to pay attention to the context I'm using these words today, because when you say the word show, it can be a TV show or you could show someone a video. But if you're showing someone how to do something, I want you to use the phrase demonstrate in a very formal situation. If you were teaching a class or if you are a university student and you were going to talk about a concept, you could say, let me show you it. That's fine. It's very informal to say, but if you want it to sound a bit more professional, or if you're in a more professional context, it's great to say, let me demonstrate this concept to you, or let me demonstrate how to do this. Let's say that someone is asking your permission to do something or to do something a certain way. Maybe someone is asking you if you want to go eat at a restaurant for dinner. You would say, that's okay. That's great. Now, if you're in a formal context and someone is asking you a question in a job or again in a university situation, and they say, would it be okay if I turned in my work on Thursday instead of Wednesday, so one day past the deadline? This is a very formal context. It's a very professional context. So saying the phrase, that's acceptable, instead of saying that's okay, is going to make you sound more professional and more polished. When we talk about sounding polished in English, it means that you give off the impression that you are a fluent speaker and you are a professional speaker. So you want to sound polished. Is it okay if I turn this in late? That would be acceptable, or that's acceptable. This is a great formal phrase. Maybe you've heard the term falling out for an argument. If you and a friend have not spoken for years because you had such a bad argument, you had a falling out. A more formal way to say an argument or a falling out is to say a disagreement. I would say the biggest difference when you want to use these, if you're using falling out with your friends or family in an informal context, you could say, yeah, the two people had a falling out. They cannot get along. But if you're in a professional context, again, at a workplace or university, instead of insinuating that there was an argument that may have not been professional, you would want to say there was a disagreement instead of a falling out. Let's say you're listening to music and it has stopped. Now, this is just a very common way to say the music stopped playing, it's no longer playing, it's stopped. Perfect informal phrase to use, and really there's nothing wrong with saying stopped in a formal environment. Now, one word I want you to steer away with, because it's too awkwardly formal, I don't really hear native English speakers saying this, is ceased. The music has ceased. That would just be awkward. Really, the only context we use the word cease is you never cease to amaze me. You never stop amazing me. That's just a common phrase, but to say something ceased instead of stopped is not common at all. Worse and inferior are two ways to say that you are better than someone, but you would only use inferior in an incredibly formal conversation. So maybe you're talking about two different animal species and you're saying lions are inferior to tigers because you are just very passionate about tigers. That would be okay, but to say you are inferior to me instead of saying you are worse than me just wouldn't make sense. It technically makes sense, but it's just way too formal and it will make you sound like an awkward English speaker if you are saying people are inferior instead of saying they are worse. Worse is a perfect, natural, informal way to say it. These next two words are very important not to mix up. If you are a teacher, a doctor, a lawyer, that is your job. Now, if you are filling out a form in the United States, maybe it's a government form, maybe it's a form at the doctor's office, it will say, what is your occupation? And you'll put teacher, lawyer, doctor, engineer, whatever your job is. But you would never want to ask someone, what's your occupation? That's way too formal of language, and we really only use occupation in writing, not speaking. If you have a person in your office place or your job that is just annoying, go watch my lesson on phrases you can use if you are annoyed or angry. It might be helpful, but you are putting up with them. This means that even though they're annoying, you're just being pleasant, you are acting like they are not annoying to you, you try not to let them anger you, but you're just putting up with them. That's the most common way we describe this. Now, a more formal way that we sometimes use is to say we're tolerating it. She's kind of annoying, but I just tolerate her. That's an acceptable phrase to use, even though tolerate is way more formal than put up with. I think you can use this phrase quite frequently as well. Thank you for watching today's English lesson on informal versus formal language. I hope you noticed in the lesson that Americans sometimes use the more formal phrase even when we're not at work, but Americans are also pretty casual, so it's probably safer to use the informal phrase first before you use the formal phrase. If you liked today's lesson, make sure to give it a thumbs up. That would help me immensely. It's a very formal way to say it would help me a lot. And if you want daily English tips, go follow me on Instagram at English with Kayla. Thanks again for watching. Good luck studying English, and I'll see you in the next lesson.